Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. We're continuing on our pandemic projects. This one is similar to one I did on the 850, but this is the Penn Spinfisher 650 SS. And the 650 SS has lost its badge, but that's what it is because Penn tells you on the spool that that is what it is. And this is the third generation of the Penn Spinfisher. It's one of my favorite reels out there. It's what a lot of people would say is bulletproof, built like a tank, ready to take a licking, all that kind of stuff. And I did one on the 850, so this is kind of like the middle child. The 650 is kind of in the mid-range, and then you would go down lower to like the 450 for a smaller version. And actually the 650 is pretty much the intermediate reel. It does everything. I'm not sure it does anything particularly well, but it does everything very good. And that's why a lot of folks like that size reel. You can fish boat, you can fish surf, you can fish drop fishing or trolling or jigging, whatever. And all of them will be handled very well and very nicely by the 650. So let's start by thanking the first responders as I take off some of the external parts. I do appreciate everything it is that you do to help keep us safe during this pandemic. And without you, there's no question we would be in a far worse place. Those first responders are law enforcement, they're hospital workers, ER workers, they're the essential personnel, emergency responders, teachers, the list goes on, the essential workers that bring us our food to our markets and everything else. Without you, there's no question we wouldn't be in the shape we're in. I start by removing the top part. I took off the spool. You'll notice a couple of things. I have a protective glove on my hand. I also have parts tray, which is nothing more than the bottom of a milk jug, but it serves well to help with the location of the parts as you go to reinstall. Now, I did an 850, but you know, a lot of people search these videos and they only search on a particular model. And that's why I'm doing the one for the 650 here, because there may be folks that don't realize that the 650 is kind of a mini-me or a medium-me version of the 850. So it doesn't hurt to do one of those and add it to the library. I don't know why I'm particularly, that screw is out, it's just particularly difficult to get out. And this little guy is tough too. I don't generally recommend using pliers, but if you're just real kind of gentle with it, you get the leverage here to turn the cap here. That cap has a felt washer in it. You can see it through there. That felt washer keeps the bearings oiled and lubed. With those three out, we're going to hopefully get this off the main gear. Sometimes that bearing gets stuck, like it did in my last example when I did the 850. If that's the case, you just need to flood that with some penetrating oil and step back, go get a cup of coffee or something, and return later. This one seems like it's kind of giving me a little bit of leverage on the case. Be careful, you don't want to bend the case or anything. You notice I'm just using kind of a razor knife to provide me the lever I need to move up and get this thing out. So we will be able to work this out without the need for the WD-40. Again, it's a metal case, just be careful with it. There you go, we've got that out. And then once you get that out, push the bearing through from the other side if you can. Like that. And then give that a good spray, because this one has not seen an oil, lube, or cleaning in a while. Give it a good spray with the penetrating oil. And if that was stuck, more so when we couldn't work that about, you would go ahead and let it soak before you did what I just did there. Same thing on this side. This was open for whatever reason. Just grab the piece. Now we're going to take the screw out of the main gear. You cannot remove the main gear without removing this screw, so please. Whoa. that was one that if I had to strain any more, was getting some WD-40 on it. It looks like I'll put some on there anyway, just to kind of help it along. And make sure when you do this that you have the right size blade and the screwdriver that you're using. You don't want to butterfly the screw, because the next time you go to take something out, it won't cooperate with you. All right, screw is out. Now we can remove the main gear. This is why I can't remove the main gear yet, getting ahead of myself. Move your axle shaft down so that you can get access to the crosswind block. And there's a bar and 2 screws that act as the retainers here, so get those screws out. It's a good time to tell you, if you're not familiar with the reels, take pictures along the way. That way when you go to reinstall, it'll give you reference points. And also, you can get the schematic for this reel. I didn't do that, but if you go to mysticparts.com and look up spinning reels, you can search for the schematic by clicking on the model that you're working on. So in this case, you're working on a Spinfisher 650. If you go to that, the schematic is available on that site. That'll give you a burst diagram showing you all the pieces and parts that make up this reel. And if you get stuck, it'll tell you how to go about getting unstuck in terms of the sequence and the placing of those pieces. Just remove the axle shaft simply by pulling up on it. Once you remove that tie down, I'm just going to clean the grease off of that. Again, you see why that glove is on my hand there. It's going to go in the parts tray. Now we can take that main gear out. And we can pull out that crosswind block. I use a pair of pliers for that. And this is no different than the other reel that I was working on. It's got a lot of old crusted grease on it. But short of that, it's in pretty good condition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flood the case with penetrating oil, the gear, and the crosswind block. And while that's kind of setting in and doing its loosening, I'm going to go up top here then. I believe this is the same wrench that I used on the other project, so it should be a 13 millimeter, and it comes off in a standard counterclockwise direction. That nut goes into there. There's a hold fast you can see on the key. I'm going to take that out. Put that in there. While you have this out, just check that the bail is functioning. It is. I'm just going to throw a little bit of penetrating oil into the seam. You don't need to do anything on this side. It's a dead end, but just let that soak there for a bit. And we should be able to come back now and clean off the old grease on the crosswind block here. When you get the crosswind block out, check. Make sure that all of the teeth are uniform, that there's no chips or cracks. In this case, I'm using a wire brush to clean the teeth out. And we can set that one aside. That one's been cleaned. We're over to the main gear now. We'll do the same thing. That penetrating oil's had a little chance to unloosen some of that stuff. You can see it come right up. That's just dried grease. I do use cotton swabs and I do use paper towels for the majority of my cleaning. A lot of folks can get more sophisticated, and I guess pretty soon I'll be accepting a challenge from Cons out in Arizona, who's going to use an electric toothbrush and some Flitz polish and show me that the mechanical way is better. And I've seen his results. It's good. But I stick to my old-fashioned hand-me-down type methods to do most of these. Okay, so we've kind of got the oil going. We used our wire brush. You do the same thing here. You check the teeth. You see a little bit of debris in the one section there. Okay, then we'll clean up the back here. There you go. Main gear's done. Got that bearing soaking there. Push the bearing out on the other side. Just be careful with them. You don't want to wreck the bearings, but you got to get them out. Do the same thing. I'm just going to let that soak there. Crosswind block would be next then in terms of cleaning. Paper towel again. And if the paper towel starts to get loaded, or if your cotton swabs get loaded, just get rid of them. They're cheap enough. That's good. Our bearings are soaking. Then we have the internal part of the case here to go. And then we'll go up top and work on that pinion gear. There you go. You can just see how nice a job just a little bit of penetrating oil does in terms of loosening the dried grease. Back to the paper towel. So this is a favorite of a lot of surf fishermen because of that skirted spool feature. That skirted spool allows the water to drain from the spool over the side of the reel rather than into the rotor cup. And if it's draining over the side, chances are it won't get inside the reel to clog the reel up. So always been a favorite. All right, I'm going to just take those bearings and put them over here on the side for a moment so I don't kick them off the table. Now we want to remove the pinion gear. In order to do that, the first thing we're going to do is remove the dog. That's the anti-reverse dog there. That has a shouldered screw. You can see that there's no thread below the halfway point. Then we pull both the dog and this little ratchet up. We got to take that off. Pull the ratchet and the dog off. And now we have access to this triangular shaped hold down clip. And we're going to pull the 3 screws out of that. That's holding your pinion gear down. And a lot of folks ask, if my pinion gear gets stuck, how do I remove it? Well, one of the ways to remove a pinion gear that's stuck, regardless of whether it's on this reel or another one, is once you remove the hold down collar, which is what we're doing now, you can always go back and reattach the rotor. And then when you reattach the rotor, you have additional leverage to pull up. So you would simply take this, put this back on, put the nut back on, and pull off. But in this case, I'm 2 for 2 in having these pinion gears come out pretty good. All right, cleaning up the channel on the inside of that, coming down and just cleaning up the balance on that little piece there. This case is good. I'm going to just do the same thing we've done with the others because I'm seeing a little bit of corrosion there. Just put a little bit of penetrating oil onto the override for the anti-reverse. Clean up the ratchet. Oh, I mentioned this on the other video, but I'm doing everything from fresh again just because. This is a toothed anti-reverse dog. One tooth goes on each side of the anti-reverse ratchet. And you know you have the ratchet installed properly when you have pieces of a jigsaw puzzle fitting together there. That's the proper installation. If you were to put it backwards, you would see that there's no way that that dog would work, and that's kind of the key to success. All right, there's a collar that comes off. There's a bearing that comes off. Do the same thing with this bearing. I'm just going to hose it down with WD-40. We'll come back and put oil on that in a moment. And then just clean up the pinion gear again. Just like we did with the others, I'm going to use a wire brush for this, just to clear the channels. While I'm doing that, I'm inspecting to make sure that those spirals are all in good condition, which they are. There's no bending or misshapen pieces or chips or anything. And so we can go ahead and start our reinstallation then. I'm going to start by greasing everything, and I'm going to use Penn's Precision Reel Grease for that. It doesn't have to be Penn's reel grease, but I always say it should be a fishing reel grease. I'm going to put that on. Check your bearings. There's just a little bit of surface piece. That bearing is working fine. I'm going to use a fishing reel oil. In this case, this is an aftermarket one, Reel X. It's a synthetic oil. You don't have to use any particular brand. Here's a Penn Precision Reel oil. But again, just like the other piece, make sure it's designed for marine use and fishing reels in particular. Okay, we're all greased up there, we can simply slide that back in. Want to get the clamp cleaned. I'm going to align the clamp now. This is triangular. Sometimes these hold down clamps sit up in a particular way. In this case, I don't think up and down matters, but there are times when it does, so pay attention as you remove it. That's always a good idea when you do those pictures. Take a picture at critical junctures, and one of the critical junctures may be when you're taking off a part like this, because it'll show the orientation. When I get these started, I don't tie them all down at once. I try to get all three and leave a little bit of play in the part so that I can properly align the holes. And then when I get the last one in, sometimes it takes longer than others, but when I get that last one in, then I can go ahead and tighten them all down and not worry that I'll be misaligned. Okay, tighten that one down. So we've taken out the pinion gear, we've cleaned it up, we've re-lubed it, we took the bearing off, we cleaned it, we re-lubed it. Drop of oil or two onto the override assembly. And this one always is good to get a drop of oil or two on. That's the override bar. Sometimes that override bar freezes, so just turn it upside down, put a drop of oil or two in there, work it back and forth so that it gets in there. Okay, we want to put the override bar, just notice there, isn't that interesting? The override bar spring is off. That'll still work in this particular reel, not a good thing. So let's go ahead and reinstall that the right way. What you need to do is just grab the tag end of that spring, bend it closed and get it around the back, like that. Now we are. Now we're properly working. Okay. Top end then. Remember what we said about the ratchet, jigsaw puzzle. I noticed that this is the top because it was scarred from the runner. Get the ratchet set up between the two arms. Set that over like this. Make sure your jigsaw puzzle is working. Back up top. I'm going to flip that to the off position. Align that hole. Bring that screw back in. And then we can tighten this one down. And we can reinstall that rotor. Alright, so the top end essentially is done. Let's get a couple of these tools out of the way. We want to bring our rotor back then. We'll make sure it's clean underneath. This is a little bit of sweat or something on the top here. Let's get rid of that. Just searching for my little keyway for this. Has to be in my parts tray because that's why I use a parts tray. There it is. And then our rotor nut goes on top. And if you're having trouble grasping that, you can always push up on the rotor nut from below. That'll give you a little bit of room to get it started. Let your wrench do the rest of the work. Give it a spin, make sure it's spinning properly, which it is. Right, and then we can go reassemble below. So first thing I'm going to do, I took those bearings out, put a little bit of WD-40 on there, penetrating oil, any penetrating oil will do. Install that one in the back here. Okay, First one up then is the crosswind block. This one gets grease everywhere. So it gets it on the back side, gets it in the stub hole, gets it on the front side, which is where the crosswind block is going to ride, and it gets it in the teeth where the main gear is going to drive this one. Now you don't need to get it in every tooth, but make sure that one gets lathered up pretty good there. When you do that, set the stud on that gear to the bottom. Next up then is the main gear. We're going to do the same thing here. Going to get a healthy dose of grease onto the main gear. Again, you don't need to get it in every tooth. The pinion gear's already been lubed. The pinion gear is smaller than the main gear, so it will spread the grease. Alright, so we're all buttered up on that one. Main gear goes in. Now with the main gear in, whoops, we didn't get that bearing in. There we go. I was holding the bearing from behind, but it didn't cooperate. Next up then is the crosswind block. You could have put this one in before the main gear, but if you've positioned the stud below, it's not a problem. Get it on the face. Slip it in behind the override bar. Now it's time to install the axle shaft. We've cleaned that off, put some light grease on that. The flat side or the indent here on the axle shaft faces out as you go to install. And when you line that flat side up with the crosswind block, you have the proper installation. Next up then, you want to check for your hold down clamp that sits in that slot of the axle. Make sure it gets aligned properly. And then those who know me know it's time to take a break, because me and these small screws do have a history. But in this case we have the little indent on that tie down bar, so this may not take as long as some of these others do. And in fact, I got pretty lucky there. Okay, there you go. So at this point, this reel should be working. You can give it a spin. Don't go crazy, you're not tied down yet, but just make sure everything's going nice and easy. Which it is. I was getting stuck on my other bearing there. All right. Since we have that closed at this point, we can go ahead and put the screw that's going to hold down your main gear from the opposite side. Again, use a screwdriver that's appropriate for the slot in the screw. Use one that's too small, you risk damaging it. Now we can take our side plate that goes on next. Same thing here, make sure that the slot in the screw matches the screwdriver. Before you go too much further, you want to leave some play in that side plate in order to get the bearing back in the case, like that. And you can put the other screws in and tighten the one that you started. But these are great reels, there's no question about it. Folks ask me what my favorite of the Spinfisher series is. I think it's actually the next generation. The 6500 as opposed to the 650, and it would be the SSG, the graphite side-plated one, still made in the US, still same quality, just lighter. Okay, I mentioned that we have a felt washer here which keeps that bearing lubed. I want to get oil onto that felt washer for sure. And that's a service you can do without taking the reel apart. You can make sure that on occasion you take your handle off. You lube that one up. Go ahead and put this one on the back. Now I'm not going to use the pliers to tighten these. Hand tighten is fine. Handle next. Since it came off in a clockwise direction, it goes on in a counterclockwise direction. Nice spinning wheel there. And now all that's left is the service of the drag set up top. So let's go ahead and do that. I use a pick to pull the C-clip out of the channel. I notice I'm holding my hand on it because it will fly. And I use that same pick to pull out the drag stack so that I don't lose the orientation. And we have one more washer in there. And you want to clean the channel out. There's a lot of grease in this one, so I'm just going to take that same pick because it's all hiding below where that washer is. Flush it with some penetrating oil, acting as a degreaser or solvent. Just run that around till you got it clean. And I'm going to clean off this one too. Looks like my paper towel's getting pretty dirty here. Let's go for another one. Okay, first one out then was this hex washer. So let's make that the first one in. Then we had the plastic Teflon washer. Then we had a round washer. That's a keyed washer, it's oblong. These are HT100 drags. You can, at your discretion, put some drag grease on. I think the last one I didn't do it, but I'll do it here just to show you. I'm using Cal's Universal Drag Grease. You rub it into the washer, then you wipe off any excess. That can go in next. Then we have the second keyed washer, which is, because we did the one, might as well do the other here. Put that one in the channel, wipe off the top washer, then come back with that little clip. Start on one side, work it around and in. Close up your greases here. Close up your reel. Put that little button on top. We have a little bit of dirt there. Might as well get that off while we're at it. Close that up, and Sonny, this one's ready to go fishing too. The only thing that's left, I did squirt this down with WD-40. I'm going to put some real oil in there now. It's got much more lasting capacity. Oil that line guide while we're at it too. Tighten it down to make sure that the drags are holding. They are. Back it off. I don't recommend leaving a drag tightened for storage. There we go. Now this has a bang drag. What I mean by that is it's going to come over here and knock this post to trip. There's no internal trip lever. A lot of folks don't mind doing that. I prefer to just cast and bring it back. Cast and bring it back manually, but that's personal preference. Make sure that our anti-reverse is riding. There you go. And override. There you go. All right, so that's the Penn 650 SS, and that's how you maintain one, service one, and do that, and it will last a long time. This reel's been out there 30 years already. All right, if you enjoyed that, please like it in the comments section. If you'd like to see more of these, please subscribe. If you have a reel that needs to be serviced, well, I do that by mail as well. And you can contact me by email on the business card that follows. So with that, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching.